welcome back once again. As we earlier said, we're going to be exploring or embarking over the latest escalation in the Gaza Strip, and Israel again violating the international law and escalating the situation, striking Gaza, killing innocent civilians that results in martyrs, children and women and elderly, and bombing hospitals and all that. Very delighted to be joined over the phone by His Excellency Ambassador Ayman Mousharafa, his former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good morning, Ambassador Mousharafa.
Good morning to you and good morning to the audience.
Our real pleasure, sir. So, the UN have debated the crisis for 17 months now, and nothing have resulted. I mean, talking about the UN side, the UN have completely failed to control the violations of the Israeli occupation, killing innocent civilians and waging the genocidal war, violating the human rights, seizing the human aid and blocking the humanitarian aid to Gaza and all that. So how do you assess the human rights role, and do you see that the UN have succeeded in denouncing those activities of the Israeli side enough to be able to stop what's happening?
Well, the United Nations and the General Assembly several times has denounced the continuous Israeli violation on every norm of international law and the Vienna Convention and the humanitarian law. But actually, those verbal denunciation it's not enough to stop the genocide. As you said, since 17 months, the continuous Israeli aggression, which resulted more than 50,000 casualties and more than 120,000 injured, and many internally displaced Palestinians all over the Gaza Strip, have resulted really in disaster, one of the biggest international disasters in human history. The United Nations really did their role doing verbal and resolutions, but it didn't apply. I mean, they should punish the state of Israel and put sanctions on the state of Israel like any other crisis, like they did, for instance, in the Ukrainian war and any other international crisis due to the blockage of the United States of America, which stand blindly in the side of Israel and use the veto right to block any United Nations resolution condemning and trying to impose real sanctions on Israel. So the verbal denunciation and most of the resolutions really failed to stop what is happening since 18 months, unfortunately.
Right. So the Israeli cabinet lately, earlier, have approved the proposal to set up a new directorate for advancing the departure, again insisting on displacing the Palestinians out of their land, in spite that they know that on top of all Arab countries, Egypt have taken a very firm stance against liquidating the Palestinian cause, against displacing the forcibly displacing the Palestinians out of their own land, and against the will even of the Palestinians themselves, who are victims to the atrocities of the Israeli side, but still they insist of not leaving their land, but still they are pushing over for the Palestinian innocent civilians to be able to leave and depart from the Gaza Strip, waging strikes against them, escalating the situation and violence, killing them, and terrorizing them and depriving them from human rights and humanitarian aid and all that. So how do you assess the Israeli cabinet situation backed by the U.S. side? Where do you think it's going to take the situation?
Well, anyway, I do see, and in several occasions of instances, that this cabinet and the coalition of the Likud and the Fatah religious right, which have an ideology that they should evict the Palestinians from Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip to form the Great Israel. It's based on a religious ideology of building the state of Israel, and I see a very good opportunity since the United States is backing them. So they see a historical opportunity to get rid of the Palestinians. And despite that, the international community and Egypt and the Arab League and most of the regional and international institutions have refused such plan, which consists a war crime, evicting the civilian population from their homeland. It's a clear violation of, as I said before, any norm of international law. But the state of Israel, I mean, they do not care about condemnation, since this condemnation has no teeth, has no sanction. Verbal condemnation is falling on a deaf ear on the Israeli cabinet, which is a war cabinet, consists of the far right, which, as I said before, has a certain role of stretching the border of the state of Israel. And you see very clearly their policy towards occupying illegally parts of Syria, refusing to return to their international recognized border in Lebanon, and starting their plan of evicting the Palestinian and even in the West Bank and Gaza, in the West Bank plus Gaza. So the Israeli government have a very, very clear mandate to do this Talmudic plan, unfortunately.
Right. Ambassador Mousharafa, of course, as we all, the whole world is observing the American stance or the U.S. stance, especially President Donald Trump's stance, the desperate attempt by Donald Trump to enforce the displacement of the innocent Palestinians out of their land to other places in the region, despite the refusal of the Palestinians themselves, despite the refusal of human rights organization and everything, and despite the violating this act, violating the conventions, the historical conventions and the historical rights of Palestinians to their land. But still, there were off and on stances by the U.S. side and maneuvering around the policies, and now they are in public enforcing that displacement. That is not welcomed even by international community. How do you think this is going to take the crisis in the coming weeks?
Actually, we have a deadlock. I mean, the Israelis are insisting on their part, backed by the United States. But I do believe that the insistence of the Palestinians to stay on their homeland and to resist, and the refusal of Egypt mainly, which had from the outset of the crisis refused any forced displacement of the Palestinians, as the presidency spelled it out several times, that the displacement of the Palestinians from their homeland is a red line for us. So we even had a plan, a very clear plan of reconstructing Gaza while the Palestinians and stay in their homeland in 2 phases. And our plan was approved by the Arab League and by the Palestinian Authority, and most of the international world have approved and hailed Egypt for their efforts to reconstruct and to solve the Gaza crisis. We have brokered several times a ceasefire, and we have brokered the exchange of prisoners between the two sides. But really, the Israeli government is in a very awkward position, and they do not want peace, and they do not want ceasefire, because any permanent ceasefire will entail the collapse of the government. And Netanyahu wants to stay in power, so the only way to stay in power is the continuation of this crisis and the ongoing plan to go to a war, and maybe a regional war if the Israeli aggressions continue.
Right. Cairo on Sunday hosted a meeting for the Arab Islamic Ministerial Committee on Gaza, and that was also attended by the EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kalas. There were several terms of agreement between all sides that attended this meeting, and they called for an immediate return to the ceasefire that began in January, respecting the humanitarian aid and not blocking the humanitarian aid, rejecting the displacement of the Palestinians, and that was also attended by leading Arab countries. So how is that going to affect the course of events?
Well, it shows solidarity of the Islamic world and civilized world, as I said, with the Palestinians, and condemning the violation of Israel, and using aid as a collective punishment tool, which constitutes another war crime. You know, Israel is committing a series of war crimes and violation of every norm of any international convention. But still, I do say before that the international the United Nations wants to impose sanctions, but unfortunately, the United States is blocking any clear condemnation of the behavior of the State of Israel, which leaves the international organization tearless against the State of Israel. We want to start sanctions to coerce Israel to stop their behavior. Without a clear regime of sanctions, Israel will never back down. And
right. Earlier there were allegations that Egypt somehow partially accepted the displacement of the Palestinians and welcoming them to Sinai, a part of Sinai. That was totally fake and false information that was released by some media outlets serving the personal interests of the Israeli side. So the State Information Service came out and totally firmly rejected and completely denied those allegations and said that it was fake, it was not true at all, and Egypt is remaining on its firm stance, rejecting the displacement, securing the Palestinian and backing the Palestinian side strongly for their historical rights on the land, and the rest of the several, important elements that were said by President al-Sisi, affirmed by President Sisi, to secure the Palestinian rights. Why do you think those fake allegations are starting to arise now? What is the aim behind those fake news about Arab countries accepting the displacement and trying to convince the world that there is acceptance of the displacement, which is totally wrong.
Most of those fake information are maybe leaked by Israeli sources and Israeli newspapers. They have a target to create confusion in the Egyptian public opinion. But the president has spelled it out clearly that displacing the Palestinian is a red line. Egypt only have accepted the very wounded Palestinians and as a humanitarian gesture. And most of them, they were treated in Egyptian hospitals and they will return to their homeland when they are completely cured. But the concept of accepting Palestinians in Egypt as a permanent refugees consists, first of all, as a crime, a war crime, and would entail liquidating the Palestinian cause, because it would be emptying the Gaza Strip from their inhabitants permanently and would help in a way the plans of Israel of creating a greater Israel.
Right. Earlier, as we all know, there was that case that was raised through the courts of South Africa, where they detained the Israeli occupation and held them accountable for all the genocidal crimes. And there was a lot of effort that was spared in this particular case in the court against, fairly taken against the Israeli occupation. What have happened ever since? Do you see that
the International Court of Justice have issued directives condemning the Israeli behavior very clearly, and usually those rulings should be implemented by the United Nations. But if it goes to the Security Council, I do see that the United States would block any effort to implement the the ICC or the ICG rulings, for reasons that even the United States have put sanctions on the court itself, accusing the court of a bias against Israel. So I do see that the international instrument of justice has been crippled by the insistence of the current American administration not to implement the rulings.
Right. Let's wait a minute and focus over this particular point. Can any country, however powerful it could be, dominating decisions of an international community like the UN, talking about the US and its allies, can any country be able to stand up to rulings of an international court of justice or any court? I mean, rulings are rulings and they are sacred and they are obligatory. They're supposed to be implemented by the law. They cannot be rejected or they cannot be not respected. So do you think this is legal?
Legality or no legality is theoretical. But for instance, there is a mandate of the ICG to arrest the Prime Minister and some top Israeli officials if they visit the European sphere and the country signatory of the ICG instrument. So according to the international law and the national law even, the country should arrest this high official and hand him to the ICG. But it didn't happen for two reasons. The Israeli official didn't go to most of the country which have signed this instrument, fearing that the national justice will arrest them. So what happened is on the right path. There is always a scare from visiting foreign countries, fearing that their officials will be arrested. And it's a kind of punishment.
Right.
A moral and legal punishment.
Right.
Whether the country is going to uphold the ruling and do that duty.
Right. On that note, of course, Your Excellency, Ambassador Ayman Mousharafa, your former Assistant Foreign Minister, would like to thank you, sir, talking to us on the Breakfast Show. And we're going to go to a short break and we'll come to continue.